Hi, this is Paul, and most of you will recognize the two people that are with me. We're talking about Breakwater, which is sort of the European branding for the estuary movement there, especially on the continent, but to some degree, in collaboration with England and Scotland. And I don't know, have we done anything in Wales yet? Those differentiations are mysterious to me, and I'm sure because I've mentioned them, I'll hear them now. And Ireland is actually very strong. We've had, quite a bit going on in Ireland, but David and Cassidy are here, and we're going to talk about sort of the state of Breakwater, what's happening right now, the event that they have coming up in November, their work on raising some funds to help make the estuary movement more sustainable on the continent. So take it away.
Yeah, well, thanks for having the time, Paul, to take with us to talk about, well, breakwater, but just estuary in general. For those that might not know, I'm involved in Germany in the estuary movement, I guess you could say, but we have a local one in Mannheim that meets monthly, and that's been pretty vibrant, I would say. In fact, I'm thinking that we're going to try in our little church community, we're going to try to start a new one coming this fall in the community center that my wife runs, and hopefully kind of reach out to a whole kind of new milieu, I guess you could say, of people and have some overlap with what's been going on. So yeah, I've been involved in estuary for 9 years now, and have really been able to enjoy that in not only me personally, but integrated into my work because I work in church work in Mannheim. And Cassidy, you've been in estuary now for a couple years as well in Netherlands, right?
Yeah, so I wouldn't, it's hard to say I'm an active member in the local estuary because I have two children. It's very hard for me to get there all the time, but I'm a sporadic guest of the Van Os estuary in the Netherlands, and I've also gone to Diego's one in Teal. That one's on a hiatus because he just had a baby himself, but I'm really eager to see how the estuary movement's growing in the Netherlands. But I've been involved with some of the estuary movement with Mannheim, as I've been help them with the festival, and I got to experience some of the stuff in the UK when I went to London to meet with the estuary leaders. So I've had my experiences with all the different estuaries here, and I've been working with Breakwater for this will be the fourth year now that we're planning events, doing stuff. So I got involved with Paul's channel before Estuary was even, a little whisper in our ears,
And
doing the
Cassidy
Randos
was the one who
conversation.
coined the Randos.
Yes, my claim to fame with Jeff Pace. But yeah, it's I don't know. I've just always been excited about what has been happening, of all these conversations happening and seeing them come into in-person experiences, whether it's meetings or the marriages, the friendships, the camping trips that go on. And so I'm just really encouraged and excited by it. And so I'm just loving what I'm seeing, and want to see it continue.
Okay.
Yeah, and Paul, you of course have actually been a big part of what's been going on in Europe as well when it comes to Breakwater, because I think you've come over 3 times now. You were in the original festival, and then a couple years ago you were in Mannheim where we had the festival, and then just last year you were on a road trip where you went through Netherlands and Germany and London, right? You
Yep, and
were.
London too. Yep.
Yep. So
Mhm.
you're probably one of the unique people that has a good sense of kind of where we're at in in kind of the estuary space in Europe. And then of course you have a good sense of what that is in North America, particularly in the US. Um, yeah, maybe we'll just start there. Where talk what do you see as some of the biggest differences in between those two spaces and how things have been, let's say, developing or how they've been growing in those two places? Yeah.
Well, so I just had the Estuary Road Trip guys who are going to be ending their road trip at Midwestuary next week. And I made a little video with them. They stopped here in Sacramento. I was on vacation, but they waited just long enough, and then they went up to Portland and then Seattle, and then are going to go down to Florida. They were in Michigan, they were in the Southeast. one of the big differences in terms of getting sort of a grassroots emergent movement going here in North America is that, especially the US and Canada, one language, very easy border, wealthy countries. So, you can raise support. They've raised a little bit of support along the way. Just today, I saw on Grizz's live stream, he just hit his goal for the money he needed to get himself to Midwestuary. Every time I go to Europe, I'm impressed at just how many more barriers there are in Europe. There's language differences. I mean, every time I'm in Germany or the Netherlands, there's always a talk about, do we do estuary in English? Because many of the people across the language groups speak English, and it sort of grows out of, a bunch of English language YouTube that has happened. Or do we do estuary in Dutch or German? The Ireland Scotland connection. So I was there for an event in Ireland again. I mean, it's very interesting how they're trying to keep groups together, and then you have the online in-person dynamic that everyone is wrestling with. So I'm always impressed with how much more difficult it is to get momentum in Europe. We've done different events, but as always with these events, so we've got Midwestuary, they have now at least 300 tickets sold. And so Midwestuary will be the largest conference we've done so far. And, then right away in October again, there's going to be the Southestuary conference that's going. Nate has more ideas about, it's just so easy to get something going here compared to Europe. So often we can get air travel is cheaper. Networks are cheaper. There's no borders to cross. There's one language. And often we can so Chino was in a Christian Reformed church. Northwestuary in Olympia, Washington was in a Christian Reformed church. Midwestuary is in a Christian Reformed church. And so that's just leveraging networks. And every time we do something in Europe, the struggle is what kind of facility are we going to have? And how can we get the people in? And even though I think Europe proportionately, especially England and the UK have a large percentage of, say, stage headliner thought leaders that you can draw on, you would think it would be super easy in the UK to do it, but it isn't. So, and in some ways, there's also these, people like Glenn Scrivener and Justin Brierley. These guys, they know estuary. Glenn participated in estuary meeting at the art conference.
Oh,
So we've got a lot of connections. There's a lot of, allies, let's say, and people who are friendly to the cause. But they're also in some ways competition, because they've also got their small little, Speak Life, or now Justin's Independent. They've also got their own little thing they're trying to do. And so in some ways, that space is a little bit more crowded with lesser potential than, let's say, what we have in the United States and Canada. So, but yet every time we do something, and like last year when I was in Europe, we mostly did kind of a tour. So and even though, remember the venue that we had in the UK, I mean, every time we look for a venue, so often in the UK, it's like, can we have a quiet venue where we can hear each other talk? And so often it's a pub. There's just, I even got poor Nathan Ormond in trouble when I suggested he unplug the speaker that was blasting at our tables, and he got caught by the security guard. So there are a lot of challenges in Europe that we don't have here. And so that's part of the reason why, I really do want to be able to support you guys, and to whatever degree I can support you to help keep momentum going.
Well, and It's interesting your point about, Glenn Scrivener, Justin Brierley, these other sort of movements that are happening. They kind of have an advantage to us too because they're more unashamedly Christian,
Yep.
whereas we
Yeah.
choose to be that more neutral space. I mean, most of the organizers we have at Breakwater now are some type of Christian, although we do have some non-theist, and we're not we're not our secret mission is not the evangelism part, it's the estuary part. But because we don't front load that as some evangelical tool to get people into the
Right.
Christian church in this denomination or what have you, it becomes yeah, it becomes I don't know, trickier to promote, trickier to talk
Yep.
about, trickier to get support because, yeah, there's a little more uncertainty with what that means.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, that's very true. And you would think in Europe, I mean, it's always the idea that secular should be open and therefore more just it should take off faster. But no, that's not true. If you're using a church network, um, it's easier to get facilities, it's easier to get buy-in. I think especially in Europe, where again, every time I go there, I'm also impressed by the fact that the church in Europe always feels so much more insecure and beset than the church in North America, even in, blue state areas like California. There's just because to actually be an active Christian in Europe is much more countercultural. I think
Mm.
that binds Christians together. And so if you're doing something overtly evangelistic, like let's say Justin Brierley is doing or Glenn Scrivener's doing, it's easier to sort of congeal that support. Whereas with Estuary, because ostensibly it isn't an evangelistic program, you're not, Christians will sort of look at it with a little bit of suspicion and wonder. So you're not going to get that support from churches. And again, one of the big things that we can get often from churches is a physical space, a quiet physical space to meet. And
Right.
even though there are churches all over Europe, whether those churches are alive and active and engaged is a whole nother question.
Mm.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I have lots of questions now. You laid out a whole bunch of different things that might, yeah, pose differences that just would that we maybe take for granted more in the North American context that would not apply into the let's say European context. I thought we'd start a little bit with there is something about the English language and how it definitely, when it comes to the YouTube space, it is a dominant feature of that, of course. And
Both
that,
of you are born Americans.
yes, yes. And and anybody that comes to Estuary in, let's say, Germany, it might be the case in Netherlands as well, has come through an English interest in the online space.
Yep.
That is there is very few let's say different let's say native language kind of conversations even close to the level of what is going on in English in the actual content of what people bring to this, let's say, the space of the meaning crisis. Or so that is one huge feature that I think is quite a significant difference as well. Like you don't have the German equivalent of Jonathan Pajot, right? You don't even have the German equivalent of a Paul Vanderklay. I mean, you don't there isn't that kind of reach in the online space. What what does that maybe highlight about the importance of that or the significance of that in general when it comes to creating new forms of community or movements like Estuary?
Yeah, that's a really good observation. Recently, I heard Jonathan Peugeot talking about the fact that Jonathan Peugeot is fluent in French. And
Yeah.
so he's had a number of attempts to try to do in French what he's done in English. And he keeps noting it doesn't get traction. because just the cultural foundation upon which what he's accomplished is there in English and it isn't in French. It's a completely different context in terms of the depth and the strata. So even all of the things that we are working on, to a degree, this is very much this is much stronger in the English language world, even though there is carryover in some of these other languages. Another thing that you notice very quickly is if you have a YouTube channel that that works in this space. Now, obviously, my videos are in English, but there's a fair amount of content from people who are non-native English speakers from non-primarily English language countries. I mean, like Stories of Old. He's a Dutchman. There's a lot of successful YouTube channels from other places in the world that are working in English. One of the things you notice immediately if you look at your analytics is that America is big. And I recently was watching a documentary on ABBA. And ABBA's an interesting case because, of course, you have this Euro festival,
Eurovision.
Eurovision, and they sing in English and they sort of, you know, they take off. And one of the things that they really wanted and needed to do, they realized, was you got to make it in America or you're just not going to make that much money because German language is it's a significant body of people. French is too, but just the economics of English is enormous, partly because of the wealth and size of the United States. And so when you look at, I don't know the analytics behind Justin Brierley's podcast or Glenn Scrivener's Speak Life, but they come to America semi-regularly. And I would bet that, if Justin really wants to sell books, Tom Holland, same way, you want to sell books in America. And so you're going to work to that audience. So again, because again, these are things that are in English and because your audience of this, let's say the percentage of the Dutch or especially the Germans that are listening to English language YouTube, that already decreases your impact. So then even the amount of lift you can get in the culture. I mean, it's just pushing stuff uphill for you guys. And I see that in many turns.
I would say that, for example, I have a little bit of idea of what's going on in the German language. Okay. That's because I know Germans who are active in the space. I have zero idea of what's happening in France. Like, zero idea because I don't speak French. I don't know anybody. I don't even know who, right? You don't,
Right.
and so there's that level. And there's a guy I know from Belgium. He comes to the festivals, and he's feels very isolated in the French language, and so he participates in English in these things, right? So just as an example of that. But that would be, I think, just an indicator anyway of like, I live in Germany, but how often do I pay attention what's going on in France? Very little. How often do I pay attention what's going on in the Netherlands? Very little. It's so interesting how the silos you live in because
all
the
of
space is
Europe pays
smaller.
attention to America. Every time I go there, it's like people want to talk about Donald Trump. They want to talk about American politics, and it's like,
Yeah.
goodness grief. But it's your point.
Yeah.
You're all siloed and segmented in many ways.
Now I am inviting a French guy to this next one. He's a really cool guy I met, and because of Estuary, I totally had hit it off with him, and we had a great conversation. He's married to a Christian. He himself is not Christian, and I said, "Come on up. Let's." He's a guitar maker, and so they did a bachelor party for his future brother-in-law, in our garden. So anyway, but just talking to him, I was like, oh. I can actually talk to somebody about Macron right now, otherwise I don't have anybody I can talk to. I have.
Well,
Oh, go ahead, Cassidy. Yep.
well, I was just gonna say it's the interesting thing in the Netherlands is there's such a high level of English speaking people
Yeah.
here. Like even the people that say, "Oh, my English is bad," we can have full conversations. Like, okay, whatever, your English is bad. Oh, all right. But there's this sense of like even my husband, all these meaning conversations, he almost finds them easier to do in English
Yeah.
because he's listened to Vervaeke and he's listened to you, Paul, and he's listened to all of these conversations in English that it becomes sometimes easier for him to speak English. But that's not always the case. I went to the Estuary actually this month. They do one every first Thursday, and it was sort of this hybrid model because I was there, so some English, some Dutch. But there's this level at which where on one hand, they're like for myself, I can speak Dutch a little bit. I'm getting better, but like I'm not fluent. To think in that level of like meaning questions in Dutch is almost impossible for me. I can follow conversations, but to be able to say anything is almost impossible at this point. Yet on the other hand, it's kind of flipped for a lot of other people where they can hear and understand what I would say, but to express it in their own language,
Yeah.
it's much easier. But it's not that's not universals. It's a mix. For some people, I think speaking these things in English becomes easier. It's very strange.
Yeah. Well, I think about that when when I was a missionary in the Dominican Republic, I could I could swim very easily in a church theological preaching context. But if I had to talk about construction stuff because we're building churches. But if I had to talk about other segments in Spanish, I just wouldn't have it. Another issue you guys have is travel. Again, it's that old saw that, 100 years is nothing in Europe and it's forever in America, and 100 miles is nothing in America and it's an impossible journey in Europe. I mean, we in North America travel. I mean, I won't think anything of traveling 30 miles to go to a store or a restaurant. Won't think a thing of it. Sure, it's a little less convenient than 3 miles, but I
Mhm.
get in this car, there'll be an interstate. And every time I go there too, that tends to lean people towards the online, like the Scotland, Ireland estuary. They were doing a lot of meeting online, but a big point of estuary is again to build community. And one of the things that I've seen, I've run every week estuary at Living Stones now for a year, and I've just seen that running it every week. This is something from church. You tell people you're a member of the church. If you're not doing Bible studies and small groups and those things midweek, at least come to church every week because it's the showing up, it's the face to face. That is how the body is knit together. And so if your group meets once a month, you're not going to be as close as a group that meets every week, but you're going to be closer than a group that meets every other month. And so
Yeah.
again, in Europe, it's more difficult. And again, part of how the Mannheim estuary grew was it had a nucleus of friends, but it was also very local. And that obviously gave it,
We
strength.
had a critical mass,
Yep.
that's for sure.
Yep.
One of the things when it comes to Breakwater, how we've been thinking down the road is we see the place for the English equals international. I mean, we're going to have the festival be an English event always, and that brings people across the border. But we're starting to do more local. We're calling them exchanges, more of just usually 1 day events where we can have in a local language. So we actually did that the first time this year in German, and that went really well. Because you do it a little bit in a local capacity, the long distance travel wasn't is quite the same issue. Although we did have people come from Switzerland and Austria. Um, the German speaking world was represented, but it was the first time we ever did it in German, which was pretty neat. Like that was really neat to have that. And we're planning to do that again next year. And we'd like to also do that in the Netherlands and in England as well. So the native language of Great Britain there. So yeah. But we do see that as because that is the topography is completely different when it comes to that. So you can't
Yep.
just have these massive big gatherings as easily because of travel, but you also have the language barrier and all that. So we're trying to figure out, feel our way through this, what makes sense, because you need to have participation in order to build community,
Yep.
and estuary we see as the kind of the basis of what we're trying to promote, what we're trying to gather around, because there are these estuary groups happening in these different countries, but like the guy in Belgium, probably feel pretty isolated in all of that. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I think we're trying to answer two questions here too is one, what are the points of the events? And two, how do we make them sustainable? And for us, the point of the events was always community building.
Yep.
It's very fun and interesting to bring people who, are, popular faces or have big followings or whatever. That's certainly a temptation, especially as an event organizer. But I think we always realized that's not really the point. Maybe it'll bring some people who've never experienced estuary to come, but the real magic is that community participation, that place where people can get offline, stop putting their nose to the screen and actually, get their hands in the dirt and try to dig for themselves. And so these local events, these smaller events are more targeted at actually doing that, giving people that space to build that community and doing it in the local language, as best as we can. And then having these sort of festivals that are these international events that can bring all of these different estuaries together to come and try to participate there. And so trying to figure out how do we slowly grow the festival, grow as we go, so that we can allow that to be sort of the bigger, more what the moneymaker, I guess, what that more sort of like space where it introduces people to estuary. It is the place we can bring bigger names and we can cover the cost of what it means to bring bigger names, and then have those really intimate local participations that bring maybe smaller names or even just people from the community to bring something on the table and still participate in estuary and have these, smaller versions of the festival, but that are so targeted to community building.
Part of the struggle we've had all along is YouTube is a thing. We all use YouTube. We like YouTube, but the other side is, and this has been brought out. I see Chad and Neil talking about it. Luke talks about it often. Is that in many ways, really the fabric and the foundation of these communities are friendships.
Yeah.
And the friendships are sort of sometimes started online, but the estuary road trip guys. I hadn't met Joe, I hadn't met Jonathan. I'd seen, Jonathan online. I'd seen Joe online a little bit less, but to have them in Sacramento, to take them out to one of my favorite restaurants, to sit and listen to their stories in private, not with a camera on, because you can say other things there, to be in their van, it's texture, it's life.
Yeah.
And that works at a different speed. YouTube wants hockey stick channels where you have a viral video and you take off and you have, 10,000, 100,000, a million subs. The value that I've seen, I mean, we've been plucking away at this for 8 years in some ways. I have, at least. And, relationships grow. And that's the valuable stuff. So part of what we're always doing is trying to work with the various challenges here. We want to do an event. We want the event to feel intimate, but we don't want the event organizer to lose $10,000 or $20,000 on it. That's important. Otherwise, we're not going to have events.
And it's very likely that could happen.
Yes.
Like the reality is that with events, easy.
Yes. And so then you make a decision, do we go small with low risk, or do we go big, potentially high reward? So again, Midwestuary, I mean, they just hit their break-even point, and I could just all hear them, big sigh of relief. Nobody's losing tens of thousands of dollars on this event. Whew. But those are all real ideas, and it's not, and it's also a weird thing because people are used to getting together with family, and healthy families work that economically. So I just did a vacation, and part of our vacation was my wife and I are always scheming how to attract my adult children to come and spend time with us on vacation. And one of the ways we figured out how to do that is we spend money on a really nice Airbnb. They'll have to fly themselves there and et cetera, et cetera. But when they get to the Airbnb, we're going to have 4, 5, 6 days together where we're just going to have a chance to enjoy each other. And it costs money. But now for this, you know, a significant portion of our participants are single. Increasingly, they're married. Increasingly, they have children. So you really want to build those friendships and relationships.
Yeah.
And because we're doing it on the back of the internet, there is distance involved. And so there are a lot of challenges in this. And so I think having these events, whether they're smaller like the Northwest Estuary that had 100 people, or larger like Midwest Estuary with 300 plus people, and whether they're not big internet names, sort of like Southeast Estuary, then the draw is I'm going to go there and see my friends.
Mhm.
And there's going to be some new friends there too. And I was just thinking about that this morning, looking at who shows up on live streams. And sort of some people just with a churn, some people disappear, but then there's a few new friends. And, it's high touch, just sort of careful knitting. And
Yeah.
that is an alien process in a business oriented world that wants 10x growth.
Right.
Well, I'd like to kind of talk about something we've talked about a couple times now, which is this idea of community building. Okay. This is something you hear people talk about. And as somebody in the church work that tries to do that, that's kind of what my work here is in Germany. I notice lots of people in this space that have nothing to do with religion, from people that are just working at the public library. They want people to come in to their library. People that are part of a square dancing club and they realize they're getting older and they'd like people to come and join their square dancing club. Or people that are just in the local soccer for youth. I mean, everybody is in this space and it feels like a really difficult space to be working in the terms of what is community and what is community building. I want to just jump back a little bit where you mentioned ABBA, and you talked about it in terms of the English language that they got big because they made it in America. On the way over, I flew yesterday to the States. I'm in the States right now, and I watched. I'm a big fan of. I'm showing my tribalism here of Led Zeppelin, and I saw a great documentary just on how they became Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
And I was not aware that they basically they were known musicians in England, but they had to make it in the US and they toured their butts off essentially in the US, and that's how they became Led Zeppelin, and before they came back to Europe and everything. Okay, what I was thinking about, there was all this interest and fans and word of mouth and this energy that went around this group, right? Because this is before the internet and everything. How did that spread? And it was so fascinating to watch how a group like that became popular and their music got exposed and all that kind of thing. But I don't know if anybody would have used the word community being formed around Led Zeppelin. Okay. I think of today, and I think of many, let's say we were talking about the kind of the influencer space, or even, to be a Swiftie is kind of being part of a community these days, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's something about that word, and there's something about that state of being with others in relationship that we're yearning for.
Yeah.
And we're applying it in a weird, I think, in a weird way.
Yep.
So lots of things these days.
Yep.
Okay, let me land the plane. What what has this got to do with estuary? What is this space that is in the culture right now that we're trying to figure out community, and what is estuary doing in that space that other things are not? What yeah.
No, I was so on the video that I released this morning that I made yesterday,
Estuary.
yesterday,
Estuary.
yesterday, that I made yesterday.
Let's say estuary to estuary. Yeah.
That's right. I had come across this Mormon woman whose husband cheated on her, and she deconstructed. So another Mormon deconstruction story. And it was interesting because in her video, she's talking about her community that's around. So here you have a story of adultery and the destruction of a home and the loss of faith. And we're going to have a community around this.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of Peugeot's comment that he made to Rebel Wisdom back in the day. It said, you're not going to found a community around anything that's against or rebel or any of that, because it's always parasitic. It is always the only way you have that community is if you all sort of gather around a sense of hurt over brokenness. And
Right.
that's a problem. Estuary for me, before there was estuary, there was always in my mind a hunger to have conversations across the Christian line. I live in Sacramento isn't as deep blue as California can be. The Bay is probably more so. But I always wanted to have better conversations with people outside the church. And just as we've seen, and I've seen countless times with how many deconstruction stories and or people who haven't had any background in religion, they sense the nihilism, they feel the loneliness, they're tempted by despair. I was just seeing, a little bit of a home math video right now, and part of what he was talking about is that most people used to meet potential spouses within their community. Chad mentioned a video about a woman talking about the Amish, and she was talking about how do you find a mate if you're Amish? Well, it's not only does this person have to be Amish, they have to be from your own little tribe within the Amish community.
Yeah.
And then, I'm probably going to use this in a video. It's at least a competing idea in my head. And then courtship is like the dude goes over to the girl's house and can basically spend the night with her in the room, but has to leave before the parents get up in the morning. They're not supposed to have sex. And I'm just thinking, really? I mean, that's one way to seal the deal. But you had, and what the point home math was making was, what that did was increase the distribution of men and women, because you're not competing with the super high status dudes who, have six packs and, 7-figure salaries, or, the super most beautiful women. You've brought a real community in where people can actually get to know each other, and human beings. I'm also connected with elementary school communities, and there's a fair amount of conversation in elementary school communities about how unprepared early elementary children are just for school. Mm-hmm. And there's they haven't had all of sort of the normal childhood things of both physical exploration plus sort of a secure social community with a limited number of adults and secure attachment with mom and dad. Mm-hmm. They've got quickly farmed out to daycare, and so teachers have come and gone, and they're mostly socialized by their age group. And I mean, all these kinds of issues. This question of human flourishing with respect to small scale face-to-face community, may in the next 10 to 20 years hit crisis level if it isn't already. And so what I see out in the general population of people who don't have a church community have their family structures are demolished or destroyed by divorce or betrayal. They're mostly interacting with human beings via screens, and much of that sort of Netflix or other mass things. So they have all these weird parasocial relationships with
Right.
actors and stuff. I think part of the reason Virtually Not Alone and the TLC caught some traction was this is a level down. If I want to talk to Luke Thompson, it's not that hard. It's a little harder to talk to PBK, but still not that hard. And so what Estuary provided, and when I look at the kind of people who come every week to my local estuary, those who don't stay for church, they realized they needed community. And you find that all over the internet. People need community. But how much community are you really going to have around the sad story of the Mormon woman who lost her family because her husband was a dirtbag? You might have some commonality because you also married a dirtbag, but it's not going to get you far. So I wanted something in church that people who probably for a fair amount of time would say, boy, you're a Calvinist church. I don't know if I can deal with substitutionary atonement or divine election or even the existence of God, but I really have good conversations with you people. And I'm involved in some other meetups out there, and all of those conversations tend to break down in bickering and fighting and bottoming out over petty social over culture war issues. And it's enormously refreshing to sit and have a really meaningful conversation. We've got plenty of differences between us, but in this context, the differences don't necessarily cause strife. They elicit interest and opportunity rather than conflict and division. Mm-hmm. And, when I look at the successful estuaries around the world, that's what I see. Mm-hmm. That it's not just, we have some very successful estuaries just within churches because the protocol works great for that. But some of the estuaries I'm really excited about are like mine, like John Van Donk's, where some of these people, they're not going to church and they're probably not going to go anytime soon, but they're really building friendships and relationships. And again, as a pastor, hey, there might be some of those people might eventually, they'll certainly be more understanding of Christianity, less hostile towards Christianity, especially in a place like California, and in the end, more open to it, even if they don't cross the line, as you say. But I think it's also just super healthy for the church, too, to have more experience talking with people who don't share their worldview or their belief system. And so, to me, this was always a no-brainer. Churches need this. It's clear that people without church communities and with disrupted families, they need this. And the difficulty is human relationships are way harder than watching a YouTube video. So if they're really going to grow in it, they're going to have to make a commitment. But we deal with that in church circles too.
Yeah. It's interesting because I come sort of from the opposite side of, I was a conservative Christian living in the Bay Area, having really productive conversations with non-Christians about it and other political things. Not always, but very often, very good conversations across aisles. And I wanted to see that in church.
Yep.
And often when I would talk about that and say, well, why can't we have a space where we just really come and listen to other people? And, it was always sort of, well, that's nice, but we don't want to muddy the truth. And, I can't fault anybody for that. I understand that sentiment, but there was something in the reality of knowing that my willingness to go across the aisle and take other people seriously is what made my faith stronger. What kept me from going down a deconstruction path that led to me joining some ex-Christian deconstruction group and hating the church, right? Like it led me into a more serious space of the faith. And yeah, it's hearing you bring this up and operating in that spirit before this even became an idea was so intriguing to me, was so exciting to me. And then seeing it manifest itself in person communities has been even more encouraging. But yeah, it's almost harder to figure out how do you get people to experience this? Because people, you can say it time and time again, like the in-person community is the only thing that's going to make it sustainable. But until you participate in it, you don't really understand it. I mean, I was even talking to Aaron Von Oss at the last Estuary that I saw with him, and he was like, "Yeah, when you're first talking about this, I was like, well, yeah, that would be cool if the stuff became in person. But now that he's been doing this monthly Estuary, he's like, I get that it's so needed.
Yeah.
And so how do you make space to get people to understand that? And you can't do it through talking on the internet. Like, it has to be experienced. And I think that's the big question that I've been trying to wrestle with, is how do you make that more palatable so that more people want to get outside their comfort zone and come and experience these things. And I've been talking to my husband about it, and Ferdy said something that has kind of stuck with me. And I don't know how it fits in the estuary space, but he said, you can't really make a community centered around building community. There has to be something bigger.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think estuary, it's figuring out how do you, what's, there is some mission above that, but how do you make that clear? How do you get that sense? Because you need something to unify, especially if you have all this diversity. You need something to unify, or it's all just going to fall apart.
Well, it's not unlike church in that people go to church for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some people go to church because they have a very existential sense that their soul needs saving, and so they cling to it. Some people go to church because it's a habit. Some people go to church because they really enjoy going. Some people, people go to church for lots of different reasons, and people come to estuary for a lot of different reasons. Mm-hmm. Some people come because they have nothing better to do, and it's a very enjoyable experience. And now they've made some friends, and they want to keep up with their friends. Other people recognize that if they don't have a discipline of being in person with people, they just get nihilistic and depressed and angry and lost. And actually sitting in a room with people different from themselves, having a civil conversation, settles them down and says, okay, well, maybe all of my conspiracy theories aren't true at once. And so that's okay. And so again, part of the difficulty about estuary is it is sort of hollow in that sense, in that Ferdy's right. And with church, you're coming around because of Jesus, because of, all these other ideas. That's much easier to do. And that's also a reason why I'm not, again, I've never been, it's never been the case that I said, unless estuary hockey sticks, unless we get 10x growth in estuary, I'm out of there. No, I don't, slow is okay, because good things grow slowly. And so, and if someone wants to keep their estuary group going, the way to do that is to not quit. Keep meeting, even if you got 4 to 6 people, it's fine.
Yeah.
I think the hockey stick kind of YouTube thing is like attractive and sexy or something, but the reality is some of the most sustainable long-term YouTube channels that are still going did not hockey stick. No. They grew slow. They figured out what their mission was. They stuck to that. They figured out how to help people within that, and they kept doing that and didn't try to keep chasing the Mr. Beast numbers. Yep. It's that like hidden side of YouTube where it's like, well, yeah, it's easy to talk about that sort of like growth and look at the analytics. Like, I never look at my analytics. I don't care, because I think YouTube is something, I really think it's sort of an experimental video platform. And if more people used it like that, we would discover things that are far more interesting than the amount of views I get on my video.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about the future of Estuary. We've been talking a little bit now about kind of the hockey stick, but bit growth and what, if it's based in community and conversation, what what do you think? What does it need going forward? Where do you think are challenges, maybe barriers to it? What would be some breakthroughs? What would be some opportunities?
Like I said before, I'm happy with slow growth. Estuary is a kind of thing that it's a tool. I want to help more people discover a tool that could help them. I know that a lot of churches have either the same frustration or the need to be able to communicate better outside their insularity. Even just for the church's own mission, it needs to get better with that. I think the events are important because one of the things that I've had a number of conversations with this, after a group is going for a little while, there's always the temptation to close the group. Because here we've got our 8 to 10 friends, and sometimes if we have sort of a meetup.com thing out there, some weirdo will show up. And we don't like it when weirdos show up. We like us. And this is a very common dynamic in churches. It's our little group, it's our little selves. We believe all the same thing, or we're comfortable with our beliefs. Here we are, and let's just, and it's fine for a family because they're a family. But I think groups, part of the reason I like the word estuary is you've always got influx, and you've got influx from two directions. You've got influx from the river, and you've got influx from the sea, because in order for something, life is always about, back and forth and new things. It's fine to have a little friend group. That's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But that group is terminal. And so in a weird sense, it's not alive like an open group. So all the estuary promotion that I do and the conferences and stuff, I think it's because it's a living thing and it should grow. Now it might grow slowly. I was just, up by redwoods, and some of those redwoods in Northern California are old. I mean, churches are trees that started in the 800s or the 900s, and they're still growing. So slow is okay. But I think you need to keep opening the door if you want to keep it a living thing. And so that's why I care about, you guys in Europe, because as long as if people are finding value in it, they'll keep doing it. And so part of being alive is seeking value. And so I love my little every week estuary here at Livingstone's. And even sometimes some weeks we've had 3-4 people. We have a wonderful time together in our hour and a half. Sometimes we have 10, 12, 14 people, a little bit more difficult. But those new people that come in, you know me, I want to hear their stories. How did you get here? Why did you come? And then what are your impressions? And they're a little surprised. The church people are surprised. Well, you've got people here who aren't Christians. Yeah, we do. And the non-Christian people are surprised. I didn't think church people thought about stuff like this and talked about stuff like this. Yeah, we do. So. So tell me about the plans that you guys have.
Yeah, so we obviously have a festival coming up here in the Netherlands at the end of November, the 7th through the 9th.
Beginning of November.
Beginning of November. What did I say?
End of November.
End of November. That's a different event.
And who are your speakers there?
Yeah, so we have Joseph Foley from the YouTube channel Unsolicited Advice. He's sort of in the agnostic atheist space, I would say. friends with Alex O'Connor, been on his channel a couple times, does commentary videos on philosophy, Jordan Peterson, different things. He's really excited to come and be part of Estuary. When we were talking to him about the in-person aspect of it, he kind of really lit up. So I'm excited to see how he participates with it. We also have Nathan Jacobs from the Nathan Jacobs podcast, friend of your channel, Paul, filmmaker, artist, philosopher, church historian. So yeah, really excited to have him as well. And then Jelle Houseman. He is a Anglican Dutch philosopher and theologian, and he has a project called Europe at Midnight, which is looking at sort of this movement from secular to interest in religion in Europe, and sort of asking the questions of what do we do with that. So we're going to bring those three together, and our theme's going to be cross-pollination. So kind of talking about diversity, how do we manage that well in a world that's increasingly more diverse, more global, and all of those things. And it'll be in Culemborg, the Netherlands, at a venue called the Gelderlandfabriek. It's a arts and cultural event center right next to the Culemborg train station, really easy to get to. And they're really excited to host us. We had to go full service venue this year because I don't know how many people know, but I had a baby 8 weeks ago, 9 weeks ago. So I'm up to my ears in diapers and children's cries and all those things, but I'm still really eager to be a part of this. And Matthias, who's been at our festivals, I think he's going to be able to come, but we're not sure if he's going to be able to come. So our manpower is just more limited. So we kind of need that extra help to take the step up. And we're really hopeful that we can make it all work. We currently have a crowdfunding campaign right now going that's selling pre-sale tickets. So right now we're selling tickets for the full festival at cost. Basically, it helps us get early funds to give a little space to make our first payments, but it also lets people participate at the lowest price possible, because we do know that these things can be expensive, not only to put on, but to come and participate with. So to give that to people at literally just what it's going to cost us per person, that's the best we could do. So that really helps. And then through the crowdfunding campaign, there's also some donation spaces for people who want to see us make the festival a success and continue some of the other things that we have in the works. Our plan is to do more events in 2026. The goal is 3 exchanges, these one-day events in the local languages in the Netherlands, Germany, and somewhere in the UK. One more festival in June. And then we're working on some online boot camps that we're going to be doing as well. So if we can get those funds secured, it gives us the space to also figure out how to make all of these other events work and keep expanding and doing more for the estuary space in Europe. So we're really hopeful for it. We're really eager for it. I guess I don't know, David, is there anything I missed?
Well, just particularly Paul, because you'll have people in your audience that are in Europe, so that's great for them to find out about the campaign, but I think many are in North America. So even visiting the Indiegogo campaign helps, because there's just ways to give just a little bit amount. We would like to start a nonprofit, and so just kind of getting some support, but knows that there's some encouragement to do that. I think, we didn't quite get into this in the estuary conversation, but it is helpful to have that little bit, that structure one step above, that's kind of giving support and encouragement and inspiration, I'd say, to local estuaries, that they're part of something bigger, that I think I just keep going back to the beginning of our conversation. I think that's a good way to end it, is that there's a lot to translate to people. What is estuary?
Yep.
And the more there's some of these kind of visible, let's say, organizations working in that space, I think helps point people towards things where they can say, yeah, there's this international group in Europe, for example, that works with Breakwater, that works with estuaries in different countries. So it's not just here in this little basement; it's also in many basements or cafes or all around Europe. And I think I'll say, I watched that. I really like that video of the road trip. I like the van, but I was, after I watched it, I sat down and I was like, wow, there are so many estuaries that I just, for me, the scale of that was it was so I mean, one, it was like, wow, there's so many. How cool is that? That's awesome. Estuary is a thing, and I can always say that to people when I have to explain, like it's not just in Mana. It's everywhere around the world in a sense. And so
Well, yeah,
when you work in that space, yeah.
that's that weird thing about internet culture where it's like, to kind of take it back to sort of the Led Zeppelin thing. It's sort of like Estuary's the Robbie Williams of the internet. Do you know who Robbie Williams is, Paul?
No.
Exactly. So
Exactly,
there's
yeah.
there's this whole I did not know who Robbie Williams was, but there's this whole meme now with my family because Robbie Williams is this huge pop star in England. Everybody knows him in Europe. They know him in Asia, but nobody in North America in America knows who he is.
Huh.
He's just there's this movie they made.
Yeah.
There's a movie they made about him, and in the commercial, he's like, "I'm the biggest pop star. I'm one of the biggest pop stars in the world." And everybody in America's like, "Who is this monkey? What is going on?" If he like pictures himself as a monkey in the movie. And I was talking to my mom about that, and she's like, "I did see that movie. I thought it was a fictional thing." I was like, "Why is the guy a monkey? I don't know." It's just so I feel like Estuary in this way. It's like this really. It's this thriving thing. There's all these little places. We're certainly not as big as Robbie Williams, but it's like. There's also that space where you can have that big thing. And I even heard Elizabeth Oldfield talking about this, but in sort of like the thought space where it's like you can have these big people and because your algorithm's not serving it to you, nobody knows what it is,
Yeah.
So it's sort of like if if I'm very honest about my view of Estuary, and I share this a little bit with you, Paul, when we were in London, I have a lot of hope. I see a lot of future in it, and like even doing this estuary tour and seeing all these estuaries, I get really inspired with it. But then if I'm honest, I also sometimes think I'm the only one who believes in this thing, and it's like always sort of scary because you're like, I believe in this thing and I put all this effort into this thing, but I don't know if I don't know what the future is. But I always am reminded by I've always like compared Estuary to Moneyball a little bit, where it's sort of like the way that we're doing conversation is a little bit different. We're not looking for the home runs. We're just trying to get on base. We're trying to have these conversation that keep things going.
Yeah.
And so there's this scene where he's sort of like, they're in this, it's Jonah Hill and Brad Pitt, and they're in this room and they're going to drop one of their big players. And the Jonah Hill character's like, you can't do that. Everybody's going to hate you. You can't do that. And he's like, do you believe in this thing or not? And that's sort of that question I always ask about estuaries, like, do we believe in this thing or not? And it's sort of like, even if everybody else thinks we're crazy, there's something about it that is just like, well, you just got to keep getting on base. I don't know. And so that's, I think for us, this festival and the crowdfunding campaign is that sort of sense of like, what sport do we have? And how can we get that space to figure out how to sort of take what we're doing to the next level to allow the community level to stay a community level, but have that space where you can do these conferences, you can do these things, but it's not fully independent. There's that support and there's that network that brings people together. Yeah. And so, that's what I kind of see Estuary as. It's sort of this thing that nobody knows about, but is also thriving and also has this life of its own. And, I don't know. I think there's something really valuable to it.
Well, that's when I heard that Joe and Jonathan were doing their estuary road trip. I mean, immediately Van Donk has to hear about this because he's not on the internet that much, and because nobody believes in estuary harder than John Van Donk, I'll tell you. And
that's true.
He was so excited, and I guess once he got them in his Yukon in Southern California, he gave them like a 14-hour tour, and I thought, I know that because once he got me and Job in Job's little car in the Netherlands, there's not one square inch of the Netherlands. I'm jet lagged like crazy out of a plane, and Van Donk brings us to the beach to eat raw fish, and it's like, what have I done to my life? All in the name of estuary. So no, Cassidy, you're not alone. We're out there, and we believe in estuary, and we're not giving up. So even if it
I'm not
feels
either,
like
clearly.
no, no.
You know, I got a 9-week-old, and I'm here planning a big conference. But you know,
Yeah,
when you believe in something, you see the value of it. Like you take the sacrifice to do it. It's
yep,
just worth it.
that's
So
right. And it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be big.
no.
I keep telling people that, but big is big is big, and small is beautiful. So
Yeah. Well, we've always tried to keep our events small.
yeah, yeah,
Not only because the beauty of like the culture it creates, but just for ourselves to say, hey,
yeah,
like we don't want to get over our skis. We want to make sure we understand and we know what we're doing. And so we are now looking at the space of like, okay, well, we need to at least try to take that step, but
yeah,
we're doing it incrementally. And David said something that I think was really helpful. It's like what we want to do with Breakwater is grow at the speed of relationships.
yeah,
And I think that is what Estuary is all about. And so
yeah.
yeah, we're taking that next step to grow, and yeah, we're hoping that we have the support to do that. But either way, whatever happens, we use that as a check and keep growing at that speed of relationships.
Yeah. All right, good. Time to land the plane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thank you both. And so I will put links below. So Cassidy, David, email me any links that you want below this thing. And yeah, I hope that the video achieves its goal.
Yeah. Check out
Yeah,
Robbie
thanks,
Williams.
Paul. Yeah,
I
Robbie
will check out
Williams.
Robbie Williams, find out who that monkey
Just
is.
imagine if Adele was not known in the US. It's kind of maybe Adele's big. She's probably bigger, but it's like
Well,
that.
she's in the U.S. though, but it's
Right.
like
It's just
he's
like Adele, if no Americans knew who Adele was. Yeah.
there's some song Robbie Williams has that's like the Sweet Caroline of the UK, and
Really?
I had never heard it. Yeah,
Wow.
Angel, right? Is that the song?
Yeah, I'm not personally a big fan of his, but yeah.
But I've never heard any of the songs. Anyways, not to get on a Robbie Williams tangent, but yeah, Robbie Williams.
Robbie Williams, there
He
you go.
didn't. He's not the ABBA. He's not the ABBA of the UK, but you know.
All right. All right. Okay, I will land the plane.
All right. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah.